Hey everybody, W here with another Stratego game analysis. Today's game, I'll be playing a silver miner, and he's a mediocre player. 151 wins, 134 losses. He does some good moves, and he does some bad moves, and we'll go over what he does right and what he does wrong. I play him two games, so you're going to get two games for the price of one. So let's get started. The second game is very interesting because I do a move that totally baffles him, confuses him, and causes him to make a logically correct decision, uh, but it winds up costing him a high piece. But let's get started with the first game. We'll go forward. Okay, so he scouts me here. And this player likes to use his scouts fairly early. I sped this up 200%, so it's twice as fast as normal. And the games are fairly short, so this should be a fairly short video, unless I drone on talking. So now this is a known sergeant, and I don't like what he did here. When I first started playing, I used to do this. I used to run up with sergeants, find a piece. If it was a captain or major, then I would come up with a major, take the major, and then scout whatever was behind the piece to just try to find the high pieces. Once I found their high pieces, I could play really well. But the problem with that is if you don't find their high pieces, then you run out of scouts and sergeants, and you really don't get a lot of information. So what you want to do, instead of coming in with a unknown sergeant to attack a known sergeant, you really should come in with a lieutenant or captain or major and take this sergeant. It's hard for beginners to do that because they don't want to get behind, but they don't understand that information is very valuable as well. So that's how you find information. You attack with a higher piece, then they attack you with a higher piece, and then hopefully it's like a marshal or general or colonel gives you a target to go after, and then you use that information to plan more attacks. So that's you can only get so far trading a unknown piece for a known piece. You really have to risk pieces, and then if they get lost, at least you get valuable, hopefully valuable information that allows you to form plans to win the game. You just do it over and over again, and that's why the best players, they know how to play from behind, and most beginners don't. So you really want to try to do that. Don't. Now there are times, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, when you should swap an unknown piece with a known piece, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So I'm moving up my captain to protect the spy. We want to find out what's in this column. Now I have to make a decision. Should I take this miner with the known captain or with the unknown lieutenant? And this was kind of a tricky decision. Normally, if my spy wasn't here, I would take this piece almost 100% of the time with the known captain, because you don't want to reveal too much information. Because every time you reveal a piece, that gives them information and it can help them read your board. But in this case, since my spy was here, I decided instead of coming over here, I was worried that this piece would come down and maybe it was a major, and then I would come over, or it was a colonel or something, and I would come over, and I didn't like that. Uh, I'd just rather have the captain sit here and then find out what it is. So I decided to go with the lieutenant. But I think most of the time it's best to always attack a piece with a known piece than with an unknown piece. And I'm kind of glad I did that now. That now we found out that it was his marshal. So that worked out really well. And he loses his marshal. So now most players, most beginners, usually quit. And they shouldn't. Just because you lose your marshal, the game isn't over. Now, he did get a piece. He did get a captain, so he's up a captain on me. It's a lot nicer if you get a general or a colonel, but he did get, at least he got a piece. It's worse if your marshal comes in and gets caught by the spy without getting any piece, or if your marshal comes in and hits a bomb and you don't get anything for it. But you really should play these games out when you lose your marshal early. Because you have to learn how to play from behind. If you ever want to become a gold player or a platinum player, you're going to have to learn how to play from behind, and this is a perfect time to do it when you are down a marshal early in the game. So his goal now is he has to worry about my general coming up and attacking him because his marshal is no longer on the board. And I have to be concerned about a general lotto attack. So we have to get ready for that. So, but his goal really, he should try to look for majors and captains and try to get ahead with low values. And then at the end of the game, I might have the highest piece on the board with a marshal, but then he might have maybe 2 more captains than me, or maybe a captain and a major. So that's what his goal is to do. So he has to try to avoid my marshal, and he wants to try to avoid my general. The one thing he doesn't want to do is he doesn't want to trade now since he's behind. He doesn't want to trade his high pieces. So now, normally, when we found out in a lot of the previous games, when high pieces were gone, usually the next piece they move is their next highest piece, which would be the general. So if he's going to move now, you can assume maybe the next piece, it's almost like 80-90% of the time with players under 500, they usually move their next highest piece on the next move. But this player is pretty smart. He decides not to. He moves something else. But I have to assume that this is a general. So I have to play defense. Now, my goal is really to play defense. And then maybe if I find some targets, then maybe I can counterattack with my general since his marshal's not on the board. So the spy is useless. I can use that as a scout. I don't want to swap. I'll get him. And now I can try to find some targets for my general. So that's good. We found a major. So now I have to be concerned. Maybe this is the general now coming from a major. Now I could move my marshal over, but since my flag is here, I have to worry about maybe the general coming over this way. So I figure I can swap generals since I'm ahead, and then maybe if he brings a colonel down, then I can try to capture the colonel with the marshal. But if I move this over right away now, he's going to probably think this is my marshal, and he'll try to avoid it. So that's why this player should try to come in with scouts and sergeants and other pieces to try to find the marshal first, and then he can maneuver his general to try to attack majors, captains, and colonels. So anyway, this is probably the general. So I'm just getting my major to safety, and it turns out it was a general. So you see, he could have bluffed there, and then he could have found my general, and then you just keep on bluffing until you find all the high pieces. And that's when you then start attacking with your general and colonel. So he went a little too early with his general, and he didn't find out much information. So we swapped. So now I have to worry about colonels coming in. And so he decided to swap majors. And that wasn't so bad. I think usually you don't want to swap pieces when you're behind, but this was a known major, and he probably was concerned that maybe I could trap that with colonels and my marshal, so he decided to get that off the board. That's not so bad because there's still 2 more majors out on the for both of us on the board, so that wasn't such a bad decision. So I'm making sure he doesn't come here with colonels. So we get that piece that moves. And now he makes a really bad move here. This was I would call this Stratego malpractice. He decided to swap colonels, and that's not good. When you're behind, you really don't want to swap your high pieces, especially when they're unknown. This was terrible. I wasn't going to lotto this, and I wasn't going to attack this piece right away. What he probably should have done maybe was move, if one of these pieces could have moved, move it forward to lure my colonel away, to get my colonel to here, so then he could use this colonel to rush and maybe attack this piece, maybe attack this piece. Because a lot of times people have colonels on both sides of the board. So if I brought a colonel from this side, he could assume maybe the other colonel was on this side, so that would give him free reign to come down with this colonel if the marshal wasn't over here. And then he could try to get some pieces to get back into the game. But I'm not sure if he just panicked or he wasn't thinking, but this was a really, really bad decision. You don't want to swap your unknown high pieces unless it's absolutely necessary. Maybe, unless I was going to come in and slaughter a lot of pieces, or if I was coming to get the flag. Otherwise, there's no reason for him to do that. So this really, it makes it much harder for you to come from behind when your high pieces start going off the board. So that was the biggest blunder he made in this game. So that wasn't a colonel. So you see, that was a good move to bring in a sergeant, because that made me waste a scout. And so that's what he should have done. You have to have patience when you're behind sometimes. And it's a good idea to run up low pieces to try to find your opponent's high pieces. And then you make a plan to attack. So this is probably a minor coming from the back row. I doubt he had colonel. And now here's so it was a minor. So here he's, this is his known sergeant, and this is my unknown sergeant. Now this is another time when it's okay for you to sacrifice an unknown piece, swap with a known piece, because I don't want this sergeant to attack my minor, and I don't want the sergeant to find my marshal. So in this case, this is one of the times when it's fine to swap pieces, swap a unknown sergeant with a known sergeant. Now I could have used this major to come up, but I didn't really want to do that, because most of the time you want to keep these pieces, these 20 pieces, as still as possible. You don't want to move them, because if I move this major up, it just gives him, he can read my board better, especially if I had my flag on the back row. Then, you lose this possibility of being a flag, and then he would target maybe the corner or maybe this. So that's why you always want to try to keep your second row intact as long as possible. So I'm going to swap sergeants. We get the minor out of the way. So my flag is safe now. He only has one colonel, and the major's here. But he does have several scouts left. So we get the sergeants out of the way. So now I'm assuming he's going to bring up his last colonel, because he knows my colonel's over here. So I'm getting ready. And now I have him set up. And I'm going to sacrifice this minor. I could move this piece over here, but then if he takes me, then the bluff is gone. I could move this piece over here, and he might take me if he's impatient, or he might hesitate. He might think this is a marshal. So instead, I'm going to do a simple bluff. I'm going to sacrifice my miner, and I'm not going to move either one of these pieces over. I move over here. He comes and takes my miner, and now we do the bluff. What most higher level players will do, gold level and platinum players, most of the time, and this is just a general rule, most of the time they will bluff with their first piece when they come after you. When your piece is revealed, they will use a low piece to bluff and try to chase you either into a bomb or towards their high piece. Now, most bronze and silver players do the opposite. They would rush in with their marshal, and then this player would run away from the marshal. So it's better to bluff most of the time than to use your high piece. And so I bluff, and he goes right to the marshal, and he loses his colonel. And then we get a spy here with a scout, and the game is over. So that was the first game. So now I play him again. I played him probably 2 hours later. He played one more game, so he dropped down to 315. So he lost 2 in a row. He lost to me, and then he lost to somebody else. I lost the next game, and then I won 4 in a row. So I played 5 games after I played him. So, and I don't even remember his setup or anything. But usually when you play someone a second time, you always want to, especially on the same day, you want to change your setup. Now, I don't think he changed his setup. I think it was the same setup. But I didn't write down where his pieces were, and I didn't know his second setup because I just played 5 games in a row. So I was just playing. I decided to switch my board just in case he wrote down my setup. And you always want to do that. You always want to switch your setups when you play. It's a good idea to do that every time. Every time you play 2 games in a row or 3 games in a row, no matter who you're playing, use different setups. Or if you're going to use one setup, like a base setup, switch some bombs around, switch some high pieces around, and make it a little bit random so they don't lotto you. So, because they will. I mean, if I would have known he was using the same setup, I would adjust my setup. That's perfectly fine to do. So you have to be prepared for that. But I didn't remember his setup, unfortunately, and I didn't write it down yet. So he was lucky. He was lucky there. But I decided to switch my setup, and I went with the flag on J4, and I think I've moved some pieces around to make it look a little different. But always do that. Always, when you play someone a second time, switch your setup, because some of the good players with really good memories would remember everything. I didn't remember his setup. I think the only time I thought it was the same setup was late in the game, and I'll show you how I remember that. So we're just testing each other out here. I'm thinking this might be the weak side again. 6 and a 5. So we want to get that lieutenant. And I hated that. I always hate that. I should have moved this over or this up. You never want to let your bombs get found by a scout. That's always bad when that happens. This was bad on my part, not protecting my bombs. But at least I got his lieutenant. So we're up a lieutenant. And he's down 4 scouts. So that's always good. was his captain, so we swapped captains. And so I let a miner sneak in. That wasn't so good. I'm not sure why he would just go for this bomb. Okay, so this is... He's trying to find out... Here he's trying to find out what's behind the lake. I doubt he would want to know what this is. But you never know. But the problem with moving these scouts up here is, I make it... I break up my block of 20. But in this case, it's really good for me because I don't want miners coming down in this corner looking for a corner flag. So I always try to move these pieces away. And that way miners don't even bother coming over here. They'll think my flag is a bomb and they won't even come to this spot if you move these pieces out of the way. So I decide I better get my marshal ready. It looks like he's bringing up some good pieces, but he's been using mostly garbage pieces so far. He's gone through a lot of scouts, sergeant, lieutenants. So this probably is a good piece. So I decide to find out what it is. And it was a marshal. So it probably was going to be either the marshal or the general. And usually when people bring over a big gun, it's usually the marshal when the lower ranks do this. So now we know where his marshal is. It cost us a major, but we are up to lieutenants, but we're down a sergeant. But no, we know where his marshal is. And a lot of times now when your marshal gets revealed, you wind up have to reveal your general as well, because his marshal is on the wing, it's out of position. So he has to worry about a general counterattack, attacking any pieces that have moved. Now the good part for him is, I like this, how he kept a solid 20 piece block on the last two rows. So that's very important to do. And you want to move as few pieces as possible, so if your marshal does get found, my general, can't come in and attack right away. I have to scout these pieces so my general has something to attack. But, I have 4 scouts left, so that's a good reason to save some scouts for the middle game. So now I can get ready to counterattack with my general. But I have to be concerned about the marshal here, right near the flag. So let's see what happens here. So I'm just clearing some lanes here, looking for pieces to attack. And I want to get rid of this miner. So he's probably, I'm going to just sit here and I'm going to try to convince him that this is a spy. And he might buy that because it was behind the lake and he tried scouting it twice and I blocked it twice. But the odds of this spot being a spy are not that high. It'd be much higher. Spies are usually more centralized than out on the wing. But it still could be a spy. So I'm not moving this piece. And now he's probably going to think this is my spy. So I get the general ready. Now he's probably preparing for a general counterattack. And I take the miner with the captain. I had an option of either or, but I don't think the major was revealed, so it was better off using the captain. You always want to try to use, if neither one of these was revealed, you always want to try to use attack with the lowest one to give the least amount of information. But then your opponent probably knows that too. So if I attack with this and a lot of my lower pieces are gone, then he might think this piece is higher than this piece. So that's what you have to be thinking about when you watch your opponents when they move, when they take a piece and they have 2 options. You have to think about these things so you can read their board and try to figure out what the pieces are. The more games you play, the easier it will be to read pieces. So now he probably thinks this is my general, and of course that was his general. I wanted to make sure because I moved these pieces and I didn't want him coming down. So at least I got a lieutenant out of it. I decided to swap, just relieve some pressure. Even though I am down a major, I'm up 3 lieutenants. So swapping wasn't so bad there. So he's moving out of the way here with his marshal. And now, this is a tactic I use all the time. And you can use this when your high pieces are hidden and when your opponent's high pieces are known. So we know where his marshal is. He doesn't know anything where my high pieces are. He might think this is my marshal, but it could be the spy too. So he doesn't know where my high pieces are. So he has to respect this piece as a high piece. And since he has the lead, he's not really going to want to attack this in case it is a colonel or a marshal. Then he would lose that attacking piece. And he wants to try to keep the lead. Now the bad part on his the problem he has right now is he doesn't have many scouts left. So that's another reason why you want to save some scouts, so you can stop these bluff pieces from coming in. And what I always like to do is bring the miner in and attack, try to open up a bombed in flag. So you want to hit the top part of a triangle. And usually the most popular spot for a flag is here, 4 over from the left. So you want to target this spot. Or 4 over from the right, and you want to target this spot with your miner. And so what you want to do is you want to come in here and chase a piece. And you want to maybe chase a piece for a while and then just maybe park the piece for a while. You don't want to come right in and then down to here, because a lot of times the player will think that then it might be a miner bluff here and they'll attack your miner. But if you chase a piece for a while, maybe get like you're into the 2 square rule where you can't move anymore, then go down and then attack the piece, and your opponent probably won't attack your miner. So that's my goal here. I want to try to maybe open up the flag. Now I forgot where the marshal came from. I think he came from this side. So I probably should have maybe targeted this piece, or the flag might be in the corner, but it might be over here. But I think I was going to attack either this or this, because center pieces for bombs are pretty popular too. So, but that's the goal. You can do that. And then the reason you can do that is because they don't know your high pieces and you know where theirs are. So this can come in and they're going to be afraid of this piece. They don't want to lose their lead. Now I thought, now he's bringing over a piece here, and since he probably thinks this is a spy, he probably thinks this might be a colonel. And this was the kind of, this player, he liked to swap pieces. So he's probably thinking this is a colonel, and then he brings over his colonel to swap. And he has one more scout. Maybe he'll scout this to see if it is a spy then. So I'm just sitting tight, and I'm going to come chase this piece. I thought this piece might have been a colonel, and I was wrong. But I was going to chase this for a while. So now, all right, here's the big moment of the game. He takes my lieutenant with the colonel, and now it's my turn. All right, look at my board. Look at the situation. It's my turn. What move would you make? There's several possibilities. Let's see if you can guess what I did. I did something very unusual. But pause the video, think for a couple minutes all the different moves I could make. And remember, this is a marshal here. So it's my turn. What should I do? Should I take the colonel? Should I go over here to protect my flag? What should I do? Should I back up? Think about it, and then we'll talk about it in a minute. Okay, now there are several things I could have done. The first thing, the easiest thing to do would be to take the colonel. But if I take the colonel, the problem is my flag's here, and you remember just like I guess a week ago or so, I uploaded the video where I lost the game, where my opponent lottoed my flag with his marshal. If I move up and take his colonel, he has two options. He could take me, but why would he want to swap? Because he's down a colonel. He could move up here, but he would be trapped. He couldn't go anywhere with my marshal here. So I was afraid if I took the colonel, he would come down and lotto my flag, and the game would be over, and that would suck. So we didn't like that option. Now, normally, if it's at the start of the game and I have a lot of pressure in front of my flag, I would do this. I would take the colonel, and I would bet that my opponent wouldn't lotto my flag, and I think 80% of the time they wouldn't. But in this case, later in the game, I think it's maybe an 80% chance he would lotto my flag. So I didn't want to risk that. Another move I could have done, I thought about, was just backing off. If he thinks this is my spy, all I have to do is move down here. He'll probably chase to here, and then I take him on the next move. And I bet you that would have worked maybe 95% of the time. I think he would have fell for that. But I was worried if I backed up here, I was worried that the marshal might come down here, and I didn't want the marshal near my flag. So I didn't like that option. So what I decided to do, which was really unusual, but I thought it would work 100%. What I decided to do was just sit here, not move, and I decided to chase this piece with my miner for a while, and then I decided to attack the second row and not even move my marshal, just leave him there. And I assumed then that my opponent would use his colonel and attack this piece, because my opponent probably thought, and it's totally logical, his reasoning would be correct, that there's no reason why my marshal wouldn't take this piece. If this was a marshal, there would be no reason not to take my colonel. So he's probably thinking, well, if it didn't run away, it's probably not a spy, but it's probably a scout or miner or something, and maybe he thought I didn't care about it. I was more interested in attacking this row here. So I figured there's 100% chance he's going to attack this piece thinking there's no way this was a marshal, because it just doesn't make any sense. I bet you from bronze players to platinum players, they would attack this piece thinking it makes no sense that it's not a marshal. So that's what's so great about this game. You can make moves, or maybe not moves, to totally baffle your opponent. You play mind tricks on them. This is totally a weird move, not to attack the colonel with the marshal and let him attack me. And he had to be totally stunned because it worked. So let's watch what happens. I chase, and I thought this was a colonel. I chase it back and forth, and I do the 2 square rule that I couldn't go back, and now I go down here. So that was good. I found a major, and so it was here. And then we'll see how bad my memory is. I forget that the major was here. I thought it was here. So we'll see that in a second, how bad my memory is. So now it's my opponent's turn, and there's just no way he's not going to hit this. He's going to think, because if this was a marshal, I would have already attacked him. It just doesn't make any sense for this to be a marshal. And sure enough, he doesn't even think long. And now I should have paused. I missed a chance here. I should have paused for 30 seconds here just to let him think, what the hell just happened? He had to be totally baffled. He probably was thinking either I'm a crazy player, or I wasn't paying attention, or I'm a stupid player. He probably couldn't figure out the logic of me not attacking him. He's like, why didn't he take my colonel with the marshal if it was a marshal? He probably did not understand that That had to be uh, so confusing to him. I should have, like I said, I should have waited 30 seconds to like rub it in, but it worked, and I thought it would work. So I always like trying experiments. I'll even lose games on purpose because it's always for me. I like to know what causes players to do different things. You know how to manipulate them, and I will do lots and lots of tests. So then, in the future, it can help me beat better players. So, but that was very interesting that I didn't move, and he probably thought there's no way that that's a marshal. I bet you it didn't even come into his mind since I didn't take him, 4 moves earlier. And so this is great. So now I have the marshal blocked off, and I'm up a colonel, and I know where his major is. So now I'm charged. Well, I think I know where his major is. I remembered I was doing the 2 square rule dance here, and then I thought, I always like to hit 4 over, so I thought it was here, but then I thought, oh, well, I remember ending up on this square, so maybe it was here. So I forgot where the major was. So, but then I remember this piece coming up from here, and I said, oh yeah, that's from the previous game. He made a stupid mistake where he swapped colonels. So then I said, oh, this got to be his colonel. So I'm like, well, I'm going to get your major. And then I was stunned here. I was like, that's a captain? I was totally stunned. And now my opponent's thinking I'm A, crazy, and B, I'm a lottoer when I thought this was the major. So usually when I hit a piece that hasn't moved, it's because I thought it moved. And usually when I do that, I hit a bomb. So I was very fortunate that I found a captain. And in the previous game, he didn't move this piece, so that couldn't have helped me. So yeah, that was lucky there. But now my opponent makes a big mistake. He moves down and he doesn't move his major, so that's really stupid. He could have escaped with this major. He should have brought it down here and lottoed and tried to find something instead of letting me capture it. Because now, if this is his colonel, he has to do a lot of really lucky lottoing to get back in the game. He lost a captain and a major. So, I mean, it's bad enough he lost a captain, but, he could have saved this major. So that was a really bad mistake on his part. Like I say, he was just playing too fast, and maybe he was just in lotto mode now and hoping to find an open flag maybe. So, but he should have definitely moved that major. So he's coming down, and I'm getting my major to safety, and he hits a bomb, and he's down 2 colonels and a captain and 2 lieutenants. So he decided to quit. So we won that game too. So that was just an interesting game there, where sometimes you don't even have to move a high piece, and the other opponent will use perfect reasoning, perfect logic, and will wind up losing his colonel. And that's because, I have to play differently sometimes with the flag up here, right? If I had my flag down here, I would have taken his colonel. But because I had my flag here, and maybe if I would have gave him a lot of time, maybe he could have figured it out, right? Because he could have said, well, why didn't he attack me with the marshal? What's the reasoning? And then maybe he could have figured out, well, he didn't want me to lotto with this marshal. And why doesn't he want me to lotto with this marshal? And then maybe he could say, oh, maybe he has a flag up front, or maybe he has a lot of high pieces over here unprotected, and the spy is somewhere else. But yeah, that was very interesting development in this game. So anyway, I hope you learned something on these 2 games. It was a lot of fun. And remember, always try to tweak your setups, change your setups around so you don't get scouted, especially if you play someone a second time on the same day. But remember, there are aliases out there that are scouting too. So it really it really shouldn't affect you too much until you get to the gold level and platinum level. Then it happens a lot. So you really have to be wary of it and change your setups often. And then you'll win a lot more games doing that. Don't be too obvious. The game's hard enough to win, but it's really hard to win if they know your setup. And I've played people, I've played people 4 or 5 years ago, and they're still doing this same setup and the same tactics, and then they're still stuck in the 400, 500 level because they're not improving. You might want to change lots of setups. Initially, you might lose in the beginning a lot, but you'll learn, and then eventually you might find a different setup that you really like that becomes really effective, and it can help you move forward up the ranks. Because sometimes you get stale playing the same setup over and over and over again. It's plus it's fun and challenging to try new setups. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but you probably have to play a setup at least 10 games, against some decent players to see how they fare out. I would advise people to try as many different setups and try different tactics too. Maybe try attacking with majors or try attacking with colonels at the start, or maybe, playing more defense, put garbage up front and let your opponents self-destruct. That's always good when you play bronze and silver players, to let them come in, have sergeants and scouts up front, keep your majors safe and colonel safe, marshal and spy next to your general, and let them come in and let them make mistakes, because eventually they will make some mistakes, but you got to be wise enough to know what the mistakes are and how to capitalize on it. So anyway, I hope you like these 2 games. I think they were fairly informative, and you should have learned something. All right, thanks for watching. Bye for now.